You're listening to Genuine Chit-Chat. This show is for real.
Hello there guys and welcome to another episode of Genuine Chit-Chat. This week we've got actor Tom Everatt coming on Genuine Chit-Chat for the second time. So any long-term listeners will recognise Tom's first appearance was on episode 124 of Genuine Chit-Chat. I really recommend people go and check that episode out. It is a lot of fun. He talks about acting, being a tour guide, free will and determinism, and loads of other cool things too. So you don't have to listen to that episode to enjoy this one, but I recommend people do listen to it because Tom's just a lot of fun to listen to. So what can you expect in this part then, guys? So this is part one of the chat. It's an extra long one as usual. So this is part one. Part two will be dropping on this feed next week at the same time. But anyone who is a supporter on Patreon, that is patreon.com/genuinechitchat, anyone who supports the show for as little as £1 a month will get access to the Patreon exclusive feed, which gets early access to Genuine Chit-Chat episodes. Whenever episodes get split like this, the patrons just get access to part one and part two released in one unsplit episode. And then also myself and Megan have got an afterthought show where we review TV and movies and stuff. They go on that Patreon feed as well, so make sure you check out the details of that in the description. But if you are not going to become a Patreon supporter, that's completely fine because I appreciate anyone listening. So in part one of this chat, in brief, we talk about stagecraft and upstaging, and then after that, that's like quite a decent chunk of the conversation. It kind of veers onto Shakespeare, Shakespeare's influence, why Tom likes Shakespeare so much. He talks about some of the details of his upcoming role for Henry V, which I actually went and saw him perform that very role a couple weeks ago. Anyone on social media may have seen me take a few photos and things and watching a play. That's what it was. And I did tag Tom Everatt in it as well, so you can make sure you check that out. But yeah, that's more or less everything, guys. There is going to be a quick promo for the American Slacker podcast. A link to their stuff is in the description as well. But I'm not going to ramble on here too much longer. So after this conversation has ended, I will be back at the end to give you guys some insight into what's going to be in part two, as well as some other stuff that's coming up for Genuine Chit-Chat. But make sure you check out the description because all the information is in there. Anyway, guys, without further ado, here is the promo for American Slacker and then Tom Everatt.
Hi, I'm Matt.
And I am Jesse. So, what is American Slacker, I guess, right?
The highest amount of dick jokes per episode per podcast.
We've been on the air for 57 straight years.
57 straight years of dick jokes.
Thing is constantly soaring over my head.
And you pulling my chain in your weekly weird news.
We're also cannabis friendly. We kind of sneak it in there, almost like you're lacing the brownies at the family reunion.
It's the ride of your motherfucking life.
Fucking 11 when there's only 10 on the dial.
Weapons of mass destruction.
It's a threat to society.
Food assaults.
Yeah, that happens too sometimes. An ostrich took a lit match into a fireworks factory.
I don't even know where to go with that one.
No, that's our third story.
Oh my God. America, what are you doing?
There's always someone dumb getting fucked over.
Well, they should have never gave raccoons rights, in my opinion.
Oh my God. You can help us. You can help everyone.
Download our shit now.
We're second America.
Welcome to Genuine Chit-Chat, where we have honest conversations with interesting people. And I'm your host, Mike Burton. Let us get started. We've been preambling, mainly me, for 25 minutes, talking about myself. As all guests know, I've pressed record now. Sure. As all guests secretly know, that I actually talk non-stop about myself for about an hour and just verbally waterboard people before they come on the show. And then when I've finally said everything I can about myself and how amazing I think I am, then I let the guests talk, and that's when I press record. That's the secret, guys, of Genuine Chit-Chat. That's what you don't know. It's not. I'm here today with Tom Everatt once again. It's funny with actors, isn't it? Because I can't get rid of any of you. Just like Tonya Todd, you're on again before part two's even been released. And Tonya Todd came on my show episode 99 or 98, and then she was on episode 101 or 102. So clearly, whenever I speak to you actors, we speak a lot, and then immediately you want to jump back on the show. So clearly I'm doing something right. So how are you doing, Tom?
Yeah, I'm good. Let me just say what a wonderful man you are, Mike. You just told me that 10 times.
That's what I pay you for.
Yeah. Yes, very well. Yeah, no, thank you for having me back. It's a pleasure to be back.
Yeah.
See what we can waffle on about today.
Oh, it's always the waffling is always the most fun conversations, especially when you're like, hey, let's talk about this, and then you don't. It's that's what we did last time. So now we're trying to get back on the rails. Let's talk about stagecraft a little bit. I keep saying stagecraft. Is stagecraft a word people use? Because I feel like I may have either created that or heard it somewhere and think I know what it means. Is stagecraft a real word?
Yeah. Well, to me, stagecraft means it basically means the sort of skill that you have, the awareness you have when on stage, to be aware of where the other actor is, how to move around the stage in proportion to them. It can mean a lot. It's particularly a word that a lot of teachers or directors use. Use your stagecraft, and I would take that to mean be aware of where you're standing. Don't sort of stand directly in front of someone, or block someone else's light if that's what's happening. That sort of thing. It's an interesting thing because a lot of people don't necessarily have it or can't quite grasp it. I was thinking of a story, and as they come to me, there's even more coming up. But there was one story of that I remember my first agent told me about a very now famous actor. At the time, she told me the story because she was at drama school with him. I just don't even know if it's worth mentioning his name. I could do, couldn't it? Fuck it.
It's up to you. It's completely up to you. I'm going to leave that to you. I never want to put any pressure to anyone to say name drop on the show.
It's a story that someone told me about the actor Riz Ahmed, who's I think just got nominated for Sound of Metal.
Yeah, I was going to say because he's in Star Wars. I'm a massive Star Wars fan. He plays
Star Wars,
Bodhi in Rogue One, the fighter pilot.
Yeah, and he's doing fantastic things. He's a superb actor, wonderful on screen, and incredible. At the time, she told me this, I don't know, 6 years ago. So he wasn't quite, way before Star Wars and that. And he'd done, as far as I was aware, I'd only seen him in Four Lions, which is a superb film.
A cracking film. That's a really, really unheard of film. Benedict Cumberbatch is in that as well as a police officer. For like a few minutes. I remember watching it. I was like, what? Sherlock's in this? Yeah. That's a cracking film, Four Lions. It's quite controversial.
It's even kind of before he made it as well, wasn't it? Really, before Benedict Cumberbatch. I think it's before Sherlock. He's very good in it as well.
Yeah, it was because I had a conversation with someone about Sherlock, I guess on a podcast, and I love Sherlock, and I've been rewatching it recently with my girlfriend, and so I decided to look online, and I was like, Sherlock basically made Martin Freeman and Benedict Cumberbatch's careers, because after that you just see the trajectory. You had Martin Freeman in The Office and things, and Love Actually, but then you see him in Sherlock, and it's like, oh, the MCU, the Hobbit films that they're both in, and this and that, and you go, okay. But sorry.
Absolutely so. But so the story that she told me was that he absolutely incredible screen actor, couldn't deny him that at all, but on stage just had no idea where he was going. He had no stage grasp. He didn't know where to stand. He didn't know where to be looking at, and it's actually a thing that it can come up, especially if you're sharing a small stage. Working with someone who has good stagecraft, but just knowing where to be. An audience should never be aware that people are trying to do it, but if you can, it should just look right. And you can tell when it doesn't look right, and you can see it. But if it looks good, no one's in the audience is sitting there thinking, "That's good stagecraft. They're standing in the right place." Because you wouldn't notice it because it's. But then if it doesn't look right, you can see it, and it's where upstaging comes from. So the upstage is the back of the stage. So technically, if you're a stage manager, which are the people that sort of do all the queuing, they do the lights, they sort of organize the rest of the stuff that happens in the show from backstage and up in the gods. The upstage is always from essentially what the points of the stage is from the actor's point of view. So upstage is, I guess, from an audience point of view, the back, the furthest away, and downstage is the closest to them. So then there's also like right and left, and the right and left is from the actor's point of view, not from the audience point of view. Anyway, upstage, it used to be called upstage because it used to be, well, quite often still is, raked, so it's on a slope or a slant, and if you're standing upstage of someone, usually that's a position of power because the other person in front of you has to turn around and look back to you, and it is quite demeaning, and it's very annoying if you're working with an actor who sometimes people can do it out of arrogance. They will stand upstage of you, so they are literally upstaging you, and they're then saying, "I'm the most important person here," even if in the scene they're not. But they're going, yeah, I am. And annoyingly, if the person at the front bites, then as an audience member, you'll go, oh, that one at the back, they're good. Because everyone's looking at them. And they're not. They're a fucking dick because they're standing in the wrong place. They've got bad stagecraft and they're doing it for their own arrogance and they're standing upstage.
I'm definitely. This is gonna be the
upstaging
snippet.
people.
This is the snippet I'm using. I absolutely love it. I love the passion, how angry you are about people upstaging. It's amazing though. I love hearing about it.
Certain things like that, because sometimes you work with so many actors that hopefully I'm not going to use this like hour or so to rant about things I don't like. There are lots of things I love.
Please do. I love it.
But there are a lot of things that actors do to better themselves, or to make themselves look good, or to make themselves feel better, which has nothing to do with the play, and it doesn't serve the show. The play is the thing. The story is the thing. We're here to tell the story of, I don't know.
I'm sorry you didn't say
let's just say
play
Hamlet,
that you're going to be in. I'm surprised you just...
Yeah, but I'm the main character in that. So if anyone upstages me in that, I'll be very upset. I can upstage them. I'm the king. Henry V is the king. He's the main part of Henry V. He's the most important person in it. If he's allowed to upstage other people. If people try and stand upstage with me to get me to look back, there is a trick you can do, is you can just keep looking forward and don't acknowledge them. And then they sort of lose it. And they lose their power.
You don't have to name names, but has this happened to you a couple of times, Tom? Is that what's happening here?
It hasn't actually. Well, someone tried it, and because he was doing it to somebody else, and it was really upsetting the other person, and it was, and I said, all you need to do is just keep looking forward, and if anything, come further forward, and. If you can sort of imagine that if you come further downstage, that you might lose a bit of your power. The more downstage you are, is generally seen as a weaker part of the stage. But if you come a bit further, so you're so close to the audience, you almost become part of them. It can actually empower you in a way. And if you don't ever look back or acknowledge them, because the audience sees it as almost like a mirror image, you can. It's the same with film, but really in theatre, you can have two people both looking forward, talking to each other, and your brain will go, they're having a conversation, they're looking at each other, but they're not, they're looking at you. And there's two people they're not two people sort of, standing side on because that wouldn't work. You always have to cheat, which is no one's going to get on because then no one can see the video.
I always did it in response with you. So on Zoom, we could just both like turn like that. I mean, not talking like that, but
yeah. You always got to sort of cheat it a bit because you want to get your voice out to the audience. There's nothing worse than saying your line upstage because no one's going to hear you when you're looking the wrong way, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because obviously that's where, as you said the sort of term upstaging came from and things. And would you say, so obviously we discussed this on the last podcast, and I'll have probably rambled on in the intro saying to go listen to the other conversation we had. So if anyone's listening to this and you haven't heard the other one, shame on you. We're not repeating old ground. But obviously in the old one we spoke about, you've basically done enough acting in basically generously in every realm, basically. So you have an understanding of the differences. And in that way, I was intrigued by, do you prefer sort of on stage acting? Do you prefer, is it called camera acting in the biz? I don't know.
You know what? I'll be honest, I've never really known what to call it. People say, I guess if some people can differentiate between screen
Filming,
and
maybe?
TV. Commercial. I don't know. Screen acting. I just call it screen acting, I guess, because it's going to be on a screen.
Yeah, because from my perspective, as like the sort of the audience, here we go, I'm doing it. As the audience kind of viewing it, it would probably be, in my mind, it's like, okay, if you're acting, say, on camera, it's because you can do things again. There's not the same pressure of, if you mess this up while we're live, you could mess up the entirety. If you're Henry V and you walk out on stage, you say the wrong line, trip over, and knock a set down. That's people. You ruined this. No pressure for you.
That happen.
Well, that's it. So, like, do you? Because obviously, it's also like performing on stage in a theatre or something is in my mind more like a music. It's almost comparing like music playing a live gig and music in the studio, where it's like they are two very different things, but they're still at their cores in a way kind of similar. So I'm just intrigued by your sort of thoughts on that.
Yeah, there's I think very few actors start, unless they're sort of child stars or they've, been cherry picked from something, or, know someone. It's very rare to start on screen first. And I think those that do then would struggle to quite, again, have the supposedly, like, people like Keira Knightley really struggled on stage, compared to, I don't know if that's true. It's just the reviews I heard of the first and only show she did on stage. That she sort of struggled with
Tom Everatt hates Riz Ahmed and Keira
I'm
Knightley.
slating so many people.
He's slating all these big actors. Next you're going to say DiCaprio is not even that good.
I'm making it sound like I know best, but no, I think, but most actors really start. I mean, everyone starts on stage, be it, in the school play or at drama schools or universities or wherever it is, amateur dramatics. Everyone starts on stage. You're not doing that on film. That's all stage acting. And I think it's where you first fall in love with it. So it's quite hard to then forget that that's where it all started. And there's something special about theatre, I suppose, is that there's a buzz around it. Every show that happens, and it was one of the reasons why the National Theatre and other theatre companies didn't release their productions, out to the public. They'll do like one night in cinemas of it being screened live, but they won't release it as like something you could buy, because it was a once in a lifetime moment. That show will never be the same again. Even if you had brought back the same actors, well, they're all, a year older now, and they've had different life experiences, and they might, one might have a dodgy knee, and one's had a child, and they're, happy but tired, or whatever. That things might be slightly different. One might be in a new relationship and on cloud nine, or whatever. Or the audience is different. The audience is different every single night, and because of that, there's so many different things that can happen, and so many variables that even though you're performing the same show that you've directed or or produced in exactly the same way, every time it's a single moment in time that will should never really be repeated. And it's special for the people that went, because you can remember, oh yeah, I remember when this happened, or whatnot. The same with any live music gig. They don't perform exactly the same show every time. Like things go wrong, things change, things. So I think that's why, for me at least, there's always something special about each individual show. There's something there, and I've done tours where I maybe across the length of the tour, the show changes. Things get slicker, like comic moments get tighter, and sometimes the more tragic moments get more drawn out because you're just feeling it more each time. But the show changes and evolves, and it's good if, again, good stagecraft is if you can adapt to that, instead of just doing, right, I'm going to do the same thing I did on day one as on day 82. That's going to be boring, whereas everyone else is going to slightly change, because you might come in with a bad mood one day. You've been out all day and you've done this, that and the other, and you just got the tube to a show or whatever, and someone bumped into you on the way, or like, I don't know, your shoelace come undone and someone trod on it, and then you tripped over and it hurt your knee, and you're in a bad mood. You don't want to do the show anymore. I don't want to be here. So you're in those moments when you're slightly irritated, you show your irritation a bit more and you get it all out. Or like, vice versa, you could be much happier in a really good mood and really over the moon when you're supposed to be, and it's always going to be different. So it's good to, that can change the performance for other people as well when that happens, and they can think, oh god, I really had to react to you being, if I did it like normal, that would have looked weird, because normally I'm not that, I don't really care when you're that, well, no, I've got a bit upset when you reacted to me like that time. So it's good. It means the show sort of evolves. And I think that's with the screen, very much depends on the director you have. There's two kind of different directors that you find with screen acting. And there's ones that are very interested in the actors, and there are ones that do not care about the actors at all. And the acting is the acting on screen is the acting department for some directors. And it's that you are the actors and I'm the director, and I'm putting together the shots. We're getting this beautiful landscape, this beautiful, working with the director of photography, the DOP, and, making sure the sounds are, I'm doing all this stuff. You're the actor. You have the lines. You know what you're doing. You do it. And they kind of want you, that's what you do. And they're going to do the rest of the stuff, and they're not really bothered with you. But then you might get directors that are very, very interested and really interested in the performance and want to tweak things. But it's, I find screen quite hard to contain myself sometimes. It's best that you don't give too much away if you, show, you don't want to show too much. I had a teacher who once said, he says, to act is to do. But if you're doing to do, then you're doing do, which basically meant, like, if to act is, just act. That's all you got to do. You've got to be, just act. But if you're trying to show that you're acting, then it's shit. It's going to look shit. Then if you're trying to show, which is sometimes can happen on screen, because there's so many other things happening around you that you don't really need to work as hard to show where you are, to let you're just in this situation and things are going on. There's music coming on over the top, which obviously you don't know what it's going to be like until you watch it back. Whereas on the stage, you have those things around you, and you can kind of control these elements because you're there feeling the moment, and you can see the audience, or feel them gasping, laughing, not laughing, listening.
Yeah, it's much more of a reactionary thing, isn't it? Where it's kind of like when you're on stage, there is more that can go wrong, but you're more immersed into it. So you can kind of, if you do misstep, it's easier to get back on without maybe the audience even recognizing it. But because on a film, I would presume it's very disjointed, because I know like certain actors, I know with films like, really big films, like, Marvel films, Star Wars, that sort of thing, because they're so hot on plot and they're like, no spoilers can come out, blah, blah, blah. An actor, no one knows a character's going to die, including the actor sometimes, until the day. Sometimes they allow them to. I think with like Harry Potter as an example, I think when they started making the films and Alan Rickman was cast as Snape, he and J.K. Rowling were the only people for a while who knew what was going to happen. Because I think when the first film came out, she was on the 4th or 5th book. It was around that time. So it was one of those things where only he knew. So he had to act in the way, these really subtle undertones of being like, you
because they knew they were going to call it back later on.
Exactly, because you can't go full heel. If, there are certain times where people can't be redeemed in cinema and in film and things. So it's something me and the guys have quite, I say hotly debated. We've talked about it, and we've passionately talked about it because we're nerds. And it's things like, Darth Vader and Kylo Ren are two big ones in Star Wars, but also like a lot of the Marvel films and things when someone's bad becoming good, etc. Is kind of like, how much can someone redeem themselves? That's often quite a big theme in that sort of regard. So with filming and things, it's like, you can be playing a character and you don't know what happened to the character in 3 scenes before, because 3 scenes before was such a big thing. They're filming that last, for example, that I imagine. And also there's scenes I can assume it's like, with other films, it can be, when you get a head scar or something, then like Game of Thrones, you get a big scar across your face, everything after that, you've got the scar and things. Yeah. But I feel like filming is more disjointed in the basis. Like I haven't done proper film work to clarify. I just know people vaguely who have and things. It's like, a lot of the time, the big budget shot is the last thing you do, but that's not necessarily the last part of the film. It's normally like 3/4 through.
Yeah, and you have particularly with film, and the bigger you go, the more money gets involved. You have scheduling issues, and you might have, your star can't do these dates. So, right, okay, we're going to do everything with the star for the first 6 weeks, but then we have another 6 weeks after that when they're going off to do, they're going to be in the final series of Game of Thrones, and we've got them for the first 6 weeks before they go. So we need to get them in all these shots before everyone else works to that schedule, because we're paying a lot of money to have this person in it. And now we need to try and fit everything else in and make sure everything else makes sense, and work around it. So, I think that's quite a common thing. It's interesting. I was, doing research today for Henry V, which I will be playing this summer, and watching lots of videos. And there's watching an interview with one of the guys. What's his name? Henry Castle, I think, who played him in 2015 at the RSC in Stratford-upon-Avon. And so the play itself, Henry V, comes with a. It's part of the sort of plays that Shakespeare wrote around the Wars of the Roses, which go from essentially Richard II to Henry IV, Part 1, Part 2, Henry V, Henry VI, Part 1, 2, and 3, and then Richard III. So sort of 100 years of history. And it's called the Henriad quite often. It's Henry IV, Part 1, 2, and Henry V. And because they feature a lot of the same characters, predominantly Henry V going from being really a prince, absolute lad, running around, going out, getting drunk, having fun with his friends, not paying attention to duty, and then sometimes having to come in and go into these battles and do that. But then really he just wants to go down to East London and get drunk and have fun in the bars with his friends. And then he becomes the king in Henry V, and it starts, he's then the king, and he has to then navigate his way through France, going to France, leading this war, winning the war, and inspiring all his troops to do this, that, and the other. And it's a big arc when you look at it like that. And the actor was saying, and I agree with him in a way, that Henry V quite often is quite an interesting character because he's so, I don't even know, so heroic in the eyes of British culture, through politics and whatever, through war and a sign of the Laurence Olivier made a film of him just around World War II to inspire British people and for the British spirit kind of thing. That's why Laurence Olivier's film was made, and it's such a symbol of being British. And he was saying, if you go in with what he is at the end, this heroic king, then actually you kind of forget all this stuff about him before, and you really need to show this great arc. But then for most people who are going to come and watch the show, they won't have seen Henry IV Part 1 and 2. They won't know the history of Henry V or what he was like in real life, which is, again, completely different to Shakespeare's version. So in a way, you have to show, it's a bit of an odd one. Like, do you show him go through this transformative journey, but if you show him sort of too confused and unsure of himself at the start, you think, well, why would anyone go to war with you all the way to France? Why would anyone follow you if you're this unsure of yourself? It makes sense if you've done the whole Henriad, because then and it's been the same people that have played them the whole way through, the journey they've been on, and they're not quite ready for this yet, but they have to figure it out now. But then in reality, you can look at it in a different way, and you could say, well, okay, I've done a bit of reading on the real Henry V, and he actually was spending a year preparing for this war. He was going to conquer, he was going to invade France no matter what. It didn't really matter if the Pope was on his side or not. It didn't matter if his lords, if his archbishop, he was doing it. He was preparing for war for about a year, and then he went. According to Shakespeare, it was like, oh, well, all the time is right. How lucky are we? Oh, we must go. It's God's will. But the real man was adamant he was going to conquer France. So then as an actor playing Shakespeare's Henry V, do you show the guy from Henry IV, which no one in the audience has seen? Or do you show the guy from the history, the real man, who is a lot less interesting and you wouldn't really want to go and watch him at a play because he's quite dull? Or do you show Shakespeare's version of him, which is going to be something in between the two, hopefully without risking that he has a bit of an arc? And because that's, everyone has to go on a journey. And I think with him, there's ups and downs. It's not like an overriding arc that he goes on, but he has a lot of wobbles, maybe, as opposed to an arc. So yeah, it's interesting. Sort of like, I think they're sort of trying to comment on your earlier points.
I can't remember what I said.
No, neither could I.
You were hoping I'll drop your hints. I forgot. I was on the ride. The thing is, with Shakespeare, it's one of those things where I know, I've described before, I have an approximate knowledge on most things. So I know a post-it note of information about most subjects. And Shakespeare is one of those ones which is just a post-it note, I know, because I can name a lot of his stuff. But I think what happens in this country is that there is so much weight behind Shakespeare, because obviously he's one of the greatest authors ever and whatnot, and he created many of modern tales. There's that film theory, which I think was it's something like there's 6 or there's 8 narratives, and every single
I not tell you this last time.
You might have. I knew it before you because I did media studies in college.
Sorry,
so you didn't teach me that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, of course you did, Mike. You know it first.
But obviously that sort of idea, and Shakespeare, we did touch this, because we said Shakespeare probably did like half of them, I think, or something. But with Shakespeare, I find that I did, and obviously we're the same age, so I presume we did something similar, for our American listeners, in secondary school, so in year 10 and 11 when we did our GCSEs, which is when you're between the age of 14 and 16-ish.
Yeah, 14, 16, 16.
I always have to, I vaguely remember, I'm like, when did I leave school? 16. When did I start college? That's when I could drink. Okay, so I finished when I was 18. But anyway, so there's English language and English literature. And then English language is both GCSEs. Literature was a lot of poetry and then a lot of Shakespeare, and then language was more so for about 5 minutes teaching you how to write, and then I can't remember what the other 95% was. But my point is with Shakespeare is that I, for the longest time, using the word hate would be overly aggressive, but I was an angsty teenager, so let's use the word hate. I hated Shakespeare because all of the stuff that I interacted with was given to me in such a boring way. Like, I compare it to science. When I was at school, hated science, didn't give a crap. I thought it was boring. I don't want to know about, mitosis and meiosis and all these sorts of other things, and, fire risk assessments and all these sorts of other really boring things. And then you come out of school and you go, I can look at anything I want. Oh, there's documentaries by, Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson, which are some of the most interesting things one can watch. Oh, evolution, when you use the example of a polar bear, it makes way more sense of just being, they were just bears around ice. One, by a gene mutation that was completely random, was white. And because of that random mutation, they were a better predator because obviously if you're white in snow, you're a better predator. So that one individual that had that mutation then could eat more food and it could mate more and etc, and then there were more of them, and then all the ones that were white in that area were then etc. That's generally one of the analogies.
They just went mad and said, look, how incredible was this that plants take the bad stuff in the air and make us live by giving us oxygen. How fucking amazing is that? How fucking brilliant is that? Don't you ever forget it. Would we be deforested, cutting down all these trees? I don't think we would. It's the science teacher's fault. I'm saying it here. Riz Ahmed, Keira Knightley, the science teachers. I'm coming for them all.
Well, that's it. It's one of those things where I just think that a lot of the youth today, myself included, when I was that age, which was many years ago now, have a disdain for Shakespeare because they're shown either the wrong Shakespeare stories or in the wrong format. So, for example, a lot of individuals have issues with, is it Shakespearean English? Like, there's a lot of, like, there's the Romeo and Juliet with DiCaprio is in Shakespearean English.
That's the original text, yeah.
Original text, yeah. See, I'm a scrub when it comes to this sort of thing. With those sorts of things, the problem is trying to get a 12 to 16-year-old to comprehend anything that isn't within exactly what they like specifically is difficult enough as it is. And I remember we were shown the film, I've seen Much Ado About Nothing when I was very young, and it's got, it's got loads of people. It's got the guy who plays Lockhart, whose name always escapes me.
It's a Kenneth Branagh film, Much Ado About Nothing. One. That's Kenneth Branagh. It's got Emma Thompson.
That's the other.
Keanu Reeves.
This is how long ago I saw it. So I saw it when I was so young. But the thing is, I watched that.
Other people, yeah.
Yeah, but that's written in. Isn't that spoken in the same?
Yep. That's in Shakespeare's original text, yeah.
Yeah, so when I was like 13, I watched that and I was like, this is shit. Because I was like, I don't understand what the fuck anyone is saying. So I was just like, I hate this. Because no one's ever taught me Shakespearean English. They're like, oh, you just know it. You vaguely pick things up. And it's like, yeah, but there are certain words that when you're a teenager, there's already a block learning new things when you're a teenager half the time anyway, because you've got that, a lot of people, myself included at the time, have that angst of, I don't want to know this shit. I want to know stuff I like, anime or video games or what are the kids into these days? Fortnite, I think, is the big thing. Minecraft.
Yeah, that's big,
I played Minecraft when I was in college, so I don't know. Who knows? But like, with that, and we were shown King Lear, the film, as well. I can't remember who on earth was in that. I don't think it was anyone famous, but it was about 2.5 hours long or something. And once again, it was in the Shakespearean language. And the problem is that I found that with English language, English literature rather, as well as what science and most of school does, to be fair, is it makes you learn something in a way that isn't necessarily compatible with you as an individual. And it kind of educationally scars you for a long time, I was really like, not, I would say anti-science, it makes me sound like a nut job, but like, I just really wasn't interested in how things worked or space or anything. It completely destroyed all my intrigue in science. And then finishing, I got a lot more interested. So with Shakespeare, I'm in this vague renaissance of Shakespeare in a sense, where I'm now at that point where I'm like, okay, I know he wasn't a bad writer. I know some of his stories are some of the greatest ever. And I've always loved Macbeth, because I remember in primary school, there was a Macbeth play, and it wasn't in Shakespearean English because I was 8 or something. I understood it all. It was funny. It was scary. It was brilliant.
It was, because you just understood it better because you understood the emotion of what was going on.
Potentially,
because like younger children can pick up languages quicker. Maybe you just understood it.
Maybe. Well, I remember it was also Midsummer's Night Dream. I think it was played by the same theatre group, and I remember that because the person had a really cool paper mache donkey head on when
they would have done it. They would have done it in Shakespearean language, I'm sure.
Really? Okay. Well,
yeah, I reckon.
You think they would? Well, well, whether or not this would make a difference, I went to a Catholic school. I don't know if that would make them more or less inclined to speak in Shakespearean. Probably more, because the Bible is written in. I mean, Shakespeare is hard to write sometimes. You try and read the Bible, but after, I know they've got versions of it that have updated and made it easier to read, but you read some of the original ones, you're like, there's so many apostrophes. You're just like, I don't know what any of this means.
Well, I mean, Shakespeare was when was he born? 1564, and he died in 1616. So that's
I brought him up because I know you're a big Shakespeare fan, so I want to preface saying I used to hate him. Now I don't. I'm sorry that I offended you. Please talk about Shakespeare.
So he was active like 1592 to 1616, and I mean, King Lear is a very heavy-going play. It is hard. I enjoyed it when I was at school for some reason. I don't know why. I just kind of got it. You know, when someone says, "Explain this word to me," and you know this word, you know what the word means. And he said, like, but don't use it in a sentence because, obviously, like, then you're just using the word to explain it. And you think, it's the same thing I used to find with Shakespeare. So I know exactly what they're saying, but I can't explain it to you because I can't explain it in a better way than he's just literally said it. So maybe I'm just a bit of an anomaly that I understood
Explain that word. No, I know what the word means. Don't worry. I know what that word means. Sorry.
Trying to think how I would without using it.
I think an outlier, but really without using synonyms, it's very difficult. If you said try to explain a word without using a synonym, I'd be like, pfft.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But sorry, anyway, Shakespeare.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about Shakespeare as well is it I think for a long time it was so, and this goes, centuries back, really, became like almost elitist. And the truth is, when he was writing it, it wasn't elitist. It was for the common man. It cost, the plays would go on for hours. I mean, most of the full-length plays now, if you did them through, would be, over 3 hours. I think Hamlet is the longest, and that would probably come to around 4.5. It is very rarely. Kenneth Branagh did do a full-length version of it with nothing cut at all. It's about 4.5. It's there are incredible moments, but there are obviously some points when you think, I am even for a Shakespeare fan, I'm getting a bit tired of this. It's a good film. It's got great cameos. People like Robin Williams just pop up out of nowhere for like 2 lines. Wow. But anyway, that's yeah. But so it can. I mean, most of Shakespeare really was, all of it was so many times was politically or like satirical. It could be sensitive of what was going on at the time, maybe not satirical is the right word. It would comment on the current times.
Social commentary.
They would make social commentary, not satire, because God forbid if he was satirical, he'd have his head chopped off. So, that's why Richard III is the most evil person in the world, because the man who killed Richard III was the Queen's grandfather, Elizabeth I's grandfather, Henry VII. So, if he said that Richard III was the best man that ever lived and it was wrong that he got killed, then he's showing that to the grandchild of the person who did it. So, and the Queen. So, of course he's going to be one-sided. Yeah.
What's it called? Learning the room or something? Like,
yeah.
It's just like,
learn the
probably
room,
don't want to do that.
Read the room, yeah.
Read the room, yeah.
So many of his the lines that I worked sort of briefly with a man called Ben Crystal, who does a wonderful book called Shakespeare on Toast, which is for anyone who doesn't really fully understand Shakespeare, but would like to. He breaks it down very, very simply, and he's a really, really fantastic teacher of it. And he did some work and they would perform Shakespeare in OP, which is original pronunciation, which means would have been like how it would have sounded at the time. And so many of what is said, so many of the words that are said, because quite often you'll read it and you think word doesn't make sense in there. It's because if you speak it the way they would have spoken it, it would have had a slightly different meaning and the spelling might have changed. Basically, what I'm coming down to is you'd be surprised that basically half of what he says is cock jokes. It is crude, it's crass, and it's not really. It's meant to be taken lightly and fun and to entertain a lot of people, because you have so the Globe today in London is an exact replica of the original one, and you fit kind of pre-COVID, I guess, 500 plus people in the pit. Standing tickets.
I've been there actually.
It's only a £5. It's amazing.
I think I have, because I'm intrigued by Shakespeare as a historical figure, and I've always, if I can go to a museum about Shakespeare, if I'm in the area, I'm like, yes, I'll go. But if it's like, do you want to read some Shakespeare? It's like, no, but I want to know about it.
Read it. It wasn't written to be read though, as well. That's the thing. So another thing, when the actors used to get their scripts, they would get their script because it was very expensive to print paper. Incredibly expensive, and they were making no money. So they would get the script, the actor would get his lines and the 2 or 3 words before his line. So he's got to be listening. He might be waiting for 15 minutes until he gets his line, but he's got to wait until, or it might be the next 3 words later, or it might be in 10 minutes time. So he's got to be listening to find out, but he didn't know what was happening before him. So it would have been quite interesting, because they've all got to be excited, listening, see what's going on. And you're there entertaining a lot of people who are going to be vocal if it's shit. But today it sort of gets put across as, things like this thing called Iambic Pentameter, which is the technical word. Yeah, I remember that. So it's the technical word for a 10 stress line, which is de-dum, 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 which is how they speak in verse. It's actually how we speak in modern English. What I just said was iambic pentameter, if you want to go back and listen again. So, for example, just thinking of it in a really easy way, because you can make it sound really boring if you try, but you don't have to when you do it properly. That was two lines, and so thinking of what we're going to do in the show. So Henry V, once more under the breach, dear friends, once more, or close the walls up with our English dead. In peace there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility, but when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the actions of the tiger. Right, that's 5 lines that would go, once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more, or close the walls up with our English dead. In peace there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility, but when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the actions of the tiger. How boring is that? But when you do it properly, it's like, it didn't sound weird the first time. It sounded like, oh, something's happening. This is exciting. But then you do it. No wonder we're all fucking bored today. This is a really dull English lesson. But it's just a natural rhythm of speech, which is why it was actually so clever. And that's probably why, in a way, scholars love it so much, because it's so clever. But it didn't necessarily mean to be clever. And quite often the actor would have, so he would have his lines, or, I was going to say he or she, but no, it wasn't no she's. The boys played women. So he would have his lines, and they wouldn't necessarily know what had just happened, but they would probably know how to react. I remember having a line, I was doing an Iago speech, and there was something about it that was, oh God. I can't remember what that one is. But it was something about it that was so slippery and so snaky about his words that every single syllable was just sounding like a snake. And you're kind of getting an idea of what he's saying. And the same way of like Ophelia has this line, one line, which is, "Oh, woe is me," which is quite a famous line. People might have heard it, but that is meant to be, it's meant to show that she is so horribly upset, and it's there as a great gift to the actor of not, oh, woe is me. That's not what it's meant to be. It's you hold on to the syllable and, oh, woe is me, which length it out, and it actually becomes emotive. And the actor playing Ophelia would have known that that is a sad line, because you can't do that. You can't do angrily, oh, woe is me. You know, oh, woe is me. So it's it was actually, you know, I think it's very clever, and it is actually so much more simple than it needs to be, or it needs to be put across, I think.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's with a lot of things, isn't it? It's comparing it to music in some ways, because the rhythm of it and things is quite easy for me. And it's just like, you know, I've had it before where I've, you know, seen a band and I've gone to see the sport acts and stuff. And you see the sport acts, go, wow, these guys are packing a punch. These guys are amazing. They've got performance and everything. And then you listen to their studio album and you go, nah, it's a bit crap, innit? Like the same songs, but because the production isn't very good. And then obviously after making the album and spending, because making music costs a bloody fortune if you haven't got a home studio, which most people haven't. And it's like, when you spend X amount of money on making the track and blah, 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 and then when you play it and tour it and blah, 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 eventually, as you kind of say, like, if you play it live so much, you realise, oh, well, if I add a little, you know, there's 5 seconds here where I'm not doing anything, why don't I just do a little solo for fun? And then live, that becomes part of, oh, shit, that's not in the, you know, that's not the studio version, that's better. Yeah. And it's like, one of the bands, Biffy Clyro, is the biggest example of that, because I like Biffy Clyro. I think they're pretty good, but like, I saw them at Sonosphere one year, and I like relatively every genre of music. I like Slipknot, I like Sia, I like Hopsin, lots of S's, but like, you know, anything, rap, classical, whatever. And I remember seeing Biffy Clyro live at this music festival, and I was like, God, these guys are a lot heavier than I thought they were. I thought they were quite, you know, placid in a way. I thought they were quite paced. And then I heard some of the songs, like, this is amazing. And when I went back and listened to them, I was like, all these songs sound like the song I just heard, but watered down. And I feel like in some way, to try to draw the parallel there for sort of analogies and things, is like, as you say, Shakespeare was made to be performed. When you have it written on paper, one reads, even if it's written in stage, and even if it says emotively, or, you know, says angrily, happily, whatever, people, when you read, interpret things differently, which is why, you know, a lot of the time, especially with young adult novels and things, if you have normally with YA novels and things, it's normally not actually the content, it's actually just the main characters are that age. That's normally, from the authors I've spoken to, that's generally the idea, is just like, aside from a few really dark subjects that generally only adult books go into, you know, YA is just the main characters are a teenager generally, because then the young adults reading it connect with the character and stuff. But when you have that, if you connect with the character and you're reading it as the character, your own interpretation of that still will be different to the next person's and the next person's. And I think there's a Shakespeare, because when most people learn it, it's in school, it's not in a way which is, you can learn how you want to learn. It's, you have to learn however basically the teacher / the curriculum interprets it. And if the teacher isn't passionate about Shakespeare, or if the teacher is too passionate about Shakespeare and doesn't understand why a 14-year-old in, you know, the early 2000s doesn't care about Shakespeare, rather than lingering, you know, rather than trying to understand that and go, right, let's try and figure out what's the reasoning, I'm going to try and make it more exciting. Instead, it's more like, if you don't like this, you're an idiot. It's like, because that's the kind of, I liked a lot of my teachers, but that was the general feel I got, which was like, oh, there's something, I don't like Shakespeare, so I'm stupid, or there's something wrong with me. When in reality, it's, I was 14. How many 14-year-olds really love Shakespeare that much when they've only been introduced to it in school? So I think is that kind of vaguely where am I reading that sort of idea right, in a sense? Because I don't know, like you, were you into Shakespeare in school, like or did you get into Shakespeare before school?
No, I think I did enjoy it at school. I remember doing Macbeth, but I think I was in year 9 when we did Macbeth, and I remember enjoying it then. And I think we did Much Ado About Nothing, and I think the first lesson was watching that film, and I actually loved the film. And because I think Kenneth Branagh has a very brilliant way of making things sound very natural, very English, very normal. I've had I have 2 stepbrothers who are not academic in the slightest, and well, I'm sure at school that they were the naughty kids kind of thing, and they even still, like, you know, not even probably like 2 Christmases ago, went, you know, So why is Shakespeare good then? I don't get it. I still don't get it. So why do you like Shakespeare? Why is Shakespeare good? It's just old. I said, well, there's lots of reasons why I could answer, but I think maybe the problem is looking at it through such a small lens. The reason that I think Shakespeare are good, and coming from me now as an adult, are not the reasons that I would have picked out of from English class. It's not, the poetry is brilliant, and sometimes the words and the way that things are put together and the amount of words or sayings that are in the English language that are from Shakespeare, that sometimes the amount of them that are in there that I don't realize, and then you watch a play and you go, oh, we say that. That's where it's from.
It's like a vocabulary cameo, vocameo. There you go.
Yeah,
invented it. Vocameo.
Vocameo. But I think the reasons why it was good at the time and why it stood the test of time is really because he, in a way that a playwright probably hadn't before, he made people like Henry V or Macbeth or these other sometimes historical figures, sometimes creations, even if they were taken from other ideas, they were creations, but made them into real people. And it was like, oh, I could be like that. And I said, well, don't be too ambitious, because if you get too ambitious, and then you might start thinking too far, and you might start getting the urge to kill your boss kind of thing. And don't get too far. But then also it's in Henry V, he has this whole scene with some soldiers when he's disguised. He goes in disguise into the soldiers' camp, and he talks to them. They have no idea he's the king, and he's trying to converse with them, and they're like, "Oh, we don't want to be here. This is awful." And he said, "No, I think, but the king does want to be here." So yeah, well, can leave him to it then. He's just going to give himself over, and then the king has to sort of later on has a bit of a monologue, and he's talking to the audience or himself or whoever, saying that I am just a man. I'm just a guy. And okay, I have all these ceremonies and I have this crown and these things on me, but I'm just a man. I'm scared of this, and I have these issues and these things happening. But and there's if there's peace in the country, you get to feel it, but I don't, because I'm still trying to keep it, and I'm working daily to keep the peace, and you're just there enjoying it. And how lucky are you to go to sleep at night just eating some bread and falling asleep? And how I wish I could do that. But I can't, because I have to do this. God calls on me to do this sort of thing, which is, he was very devout, Henry V. That's true in Shakespeare and the real life versions of him. He was very, very, very devout, which, as I said before, I'm atheist. So I have to try and overcome that as an actor. Not overcome that. That's a joke. I know you were joking. The character is very much believes he's sent from God.
And that's the end of part 1. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. As I said in the intro, part 2 will be out next week at the same time, but if you can't wait that long, head over to patreon.com/genuine chit-chat, and for as little as £1 a month, you get access to the Patreon exclusive feed, which will have this whole episode unsplit released on there, as well as you get the extra show, Afterthoughts, which me and Megan do at least once a week, and we talk about movies and TV shows and other stuff. And we've been going to the cinema quite a lot recently, so there's lots of new stuff in that regard. But yeah, just go over to Patreon, take a little look around. There's lots of other cool stuff on there as well. So what's coming up in part 2 then? Well, our great discussion continues. We speak about what method acting is, and then it goes on to a much wider berth of topics that flits around here, there and everywhere. We talk about people not knowing what they need, psychopaths, human choice, fulfillment, something called the human shadow, which is quite interesting, life experiences, memories, and lots of other things like that. So lots and lots of fun in part 2, so make sure you tune in for that. And as I said in the intro, Tom Everatt's first appearance on Genuine Chit-Chat was episode 124. Make sure you check that out if you haven't already. And make sure you follow Tom on Instagram as well if you have it. Details to that are in the description. So what have we got coming up then, guys? Well, the next episode I've got due to record is actually with a friend called Moxie LaBouche. She's been on this show twice before, I think. At Christmas, myself and Megan with Moxie did a US versus UK episode for Christmas and stuff, and we're doing another one of those for like a more of a summary edition in a sense. So really excited about sorting that out. I'm recording that next week, so that'll be out after part 2 drops on this feed of this Tom Everatt chat. Then I'm going to be going away for 2 weeks, so I am probably going to put up a couple of things from Patreon on there, just because I won't have time to edit and sort out another show and things. So that'll just be 2 kind of filler episodes in a sense, and then I'll be back afterwards and we'll figure out which episode I'll be releasing at that time. I've got lots of other cool things in the pipeline for recording, but I'm not going to delve into those quite yet. So aside from that, guys, I've actually been quite busy with guest spots. So I was recently on an episode of Mandatory Marvel and DC with Max Byrne. We spoke about one of the new 52 Batman comics called Endgame, which is quite cool. Myself, Megan, and Tonya Todd discussed the Loki series in 2 full episodes. So you can find that on the feed of Comics in Motion as well. Also on top of that, you can listen to myself and Chris Phelps of Comics in Motion talk about the new Black Widow movie. There's lots of spoilers in that. And there's also on the feed of Comics in Motion, that is in the TV and Movies episode, which was released about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago of this episode dropping. So lots of cool things there. There's a few other guest spots that I've got lined up that are either going to be released soon or that I'm recording soon. Lots of exciting things. I'm just trying to show up on everyone's podcasting feeds all the time. And you can also check out my Star Wars show, which the details of that are in the description. I just go through Star Wars comics. You don't need to have read a single Star Wars comic ever. You can literally just tune in. I talk about the story and the narrative, and I give like plot details and whatnot, but I also talk about connective tissue, you know, some of the characters that pop up, some of the species, some of the planets. So if you're reading a comic and you're like, oh, who's this random person that I recognize vaguely from one of the original trilogy films? I am the person who tells you who they are, what they've kind of done, and where you may recognize them from. So that's really everything in a nutshell, guys. I'm not going to ramble on any longer here. So I just want to say a quick shout out to Beezy the Voice. He was on an episode a few weeks ago. He's actually been on Genuine Chit-Chat twice because he does the amazing intro and outro reads for Genuine Chit-Chat, which are incredible, and I love the sound of his voice. So make sure you check out his website, which is also in the description. So anyway, guys, thank you as always for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you listening, especially all the way to the rambly end. I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll be talking to you next week with part 2 of Tom Everatt.
You have just experienced host, creator, everything elser of Genuine Chit-Chat, and also the host and creator of Star Wars comics and canon, found on the Comics in Motion podcast, Mike Burton.